Demonstrate that we are not satisfied with the status quo, voting for the lesser of two evils, and your candidate wins, and you still get evil. If you continue to vote for the Democrats or the Republicans, you are committing political suicide. The only chance we have of saving our constitutional republic is to vote Libertarian. The Libertarian Party is the party of principle. We have candidates in every state, in every county, that are principled, passionate, and articulate. Please vote Libertarian and help us restore a free country.
At this point, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you your 2004 presidential candidate, Michael Bednarik.
Good evening, fellow delegates. Good evening, fellow Americans. I'd like to share a quote from George Washington. Government is not reason. Government is not eloquence. It is force. And like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. If you live in a log cabin, you require fire for your survival. You use the fire to heat your home and to cook your food. Fire is such a necessary part of your survival that you create a special place for fire. It is called a fireplace. Government is necessary for our survival. We need government in order to survive. The Founding Fathers created a special place for government. It is called the Constitution. Anytime the fire is in the fireplace, it is a good fire. Anytime a fire gets outside of the fireplace, it is a bad fire. Conversely, anytime the government stays within the limitations of the Constitution, it is a good government. Anytime the government is outside the Constitution, it is a bad government, and it is time for us to stomp it out. The United States is the greatest economic country in the world, not because of government regulation, but in spite of it. NAFTA and GATT have about as much to do with free trade as the Patriot Act has to do with liberty. How can we possibly have free trade when Alan Greenspan can jockey the interest rate up and down? If Alan Greenspan sneezes in the morning, the Japanese stock market drops 20 points. We need to get the government out of regulating trade so that American workers can do what they do best, and that is to create wealth. The Declaration of Independence states, all men are created equal. And in 1776, that's exactly what they meant. Women could not vote, women could not own property, and blacks were considered property. After 200 years of enlightenment, we have realized that gender and race are inappropriate distinctions for determining who has individual rights. The government gives you permission. They let you know that you have permission by giving you a permit or a license. if you have a marriage license, what do you have permission to do now that you did not have permission to do before? Who gave you that permission? And where did they get the authority to give you that permission in the first place? Live with anyone you want. It is not the government's priority to set those standards. First thing that I would do would be to correct the characterization of our companies in Iraq as private enterprise. When the government selects one specific company to go into that country with carte blanche to do whatever they want, that is a government-controlled monopoly. It would only be free market if there were other companies there to offer competitive services and competitive prices to keep the services down, and also to allow the Iraqis to choose which of those companies is providing the service. None of those conditions exist, so it is not a free market system in Iraq. Libertarians are very strong on defense, but we also want the evidence. We need to know exactly who did what and why. Congress has the power to declare war. They also have the power to issue letters of marque and reprisal. Instead of sending 100,000 troops overseas, we could probably send a smaller group of U.S. Navy SEALs or Army Rangers and get the people who actually did this. But we need to have the evidence. Congress does not have the authority to grant the president carte blanche to go off and do whatever he chooses to do. I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that Osama bin Laden was originally labeled as the culprit who perpetrated this atrocity. How have we gone from Osama bin Laden to Saddam Hussein? Where is the logic that allowed us to switch from Afghanistan to Iraq? I did not see the halftime show. But I am certain that Janet Jackson's breast is not the most obscene thing that we have seen on television. When we have a Democratic president using the Oval Office on a regular basis for his little tryst, I find that far more offensive. I find it very offensive when the government tells me what I can and cannot watch. I actually find Jerry Springer far more offensive, and so I turn him off. The American people should decide what is or is not obscene, and they will make that decision by watching or not watching reality TV. Censor yourself. As I have traveled back and forth across the United States campaigning over the last 18 months, one of the things that has been most striking is the number of Democrats and Republicans who are becoming disillusioned with the status quo. City after city, I have non-libertarians coming up to me asking me what they can do to change things. And after I explain the libertarian platform to them, they go, well, of course. That's exactly what we think the United States should be. Out of all the possible voters, the people who are eligible to vote, sadly, only 20 to 25% actually take the time to go to the polls. That leaves 75% of the people who are unwilling to vote for the lesser of two evils. If we can get the libertarian message out there, we can take that 75% and we can make a significant change in government. Help us get that message out to the people. Imagine, people are not volunteering to go to foreign countries and die the way they used to. Imagine that. In World War II, when Americans truly believed in the issue, young men were lying about their age to get into the military early. Americans rallied behind that war. If you cannot get your citizens to rally behind your war, perhaps, just perhaps, it's an invalid war. The United States has far more military than any other country in the world. We have military in 130 countries around the world. Instead of doing international offense, perhaps we can bring those soldiers home for Christmas and Thanksgiving and limit them to doing national defense. Congress doesn't seem to know anything about the Constitution, which is their job. How much less do they know about medicine? Government regulation drives up the cost of producing these drugs. It costs $1 billion to get a drug from the table, the science table, out to the marketplace. You, the consumers, are ultimately going to pay that price. American drug companies sell those drugs to Canada. And when Americans try to purchase those drugs at a cheaper price, the FDA says you're not allowed to do that because those drugs aren't safe. If those drugs aren't safe, why did you sell them to Canada? Anytime the government does anything, it drives up the cost and it doesn't work. Get the government out of medicine. First of all, the Founding Fathers loathed a democracy, calling it a tyranny of the majority. The United States is not a democracy. The United States is a constitutional republic based on private property and individual rights. In the 1860s, we passed the 13th Amendment, which presumably eliminated slavery, and it took well over 100 years to erase the racial hatred between the whites and the blacks. How do the American government think that they can go into another country and override thousands of years of culture? It is not our job to export anything except products and services.